Tempers exploded live on Fox News when Karoline Leavitt clashed with Meryl Streep, who exposed brutal secrets about Donald and Melania Trump, sending shockwaves through the studio and beyond. The air was already electric before the cameras even started rolling. Producers whispered frantically in headsets. The lighting techs adjusted spotlights with unusual urgency. And behind the glossy desk, Karoline Leavitt sat rigidly, rehearsing her opening lines in her mind. At only 27 years old, the new White House press secretary had faced her share of media scuffles. But tonight was different. Sitting across from her, leaning back almost too comfortably in her chair, was Meryl Streep, Hollywood royalty, and a woman whose hatred for Donald Trump had only deepened with time. The second the red light blinked on, it was as if the air itself thinned. The host barely got out a polite introduction before Meryl launched into it. She cut through the pleasantries like a blade. "I am tired," Meryl began, voice sharp as steel, "of pretending that this man, Donald Trump, ever had an ounce of loyalty to anyone, including his own wife." The host stiffened, trying to wrest control, but Meryl charged forward. "You can see it. Every time Melania is dragged onto a stage, clinging to her handbag like it is a lifeline. She looks like a hostage. And you want to know the real tragedy?" Meryl leaned closer to the mic, her eyes gleaming. "Sources close to the family, friends, they have long since discarded, say that Melania had a secret suite built in Mar-a-Lago, away from Trump. Not for luxury, for survival. She has her own exit plan. She has had it for years." Gasps and low murmurs broke out off camera. Karoline's nostrils flared as she gripped the arms of her chair. She opened her mouth, but Meryl was not finished. "And let's not ignore the tapes," Meryl hissed. "Recordings of Melania venting to her confidants, saying she never wanted this life, that she felt trapped, that Donald treated her like an accessory, not a wife. There were rumors he tried to control every aspect of her life, from the way she dressed to who she could be seen talking to in public." Karoline's jaw was tight enough to crack. "You are peddling lies!" Karoline exploded, her voice slicing through the heavy air. "This is a gross and malicious fabrication designed to humiliate the president and his family. You should be ashamed, Ms. Streep." But Meryl only smiled, that maddening, knowing smile that seasoned actors wear when they have all the power in the room. "Oh, honey," Meryl said smoothly. "Ashamed? I am liberated. Liberated from pretending that this administration is anything but a sham. Melania's sad eyes are not just a meme. They are a cry for help." Karoline slammed her hands on the desk, rattling her microphone. The host leaned forward, eyes wide with panic, but neither woman gave him so much as a glance. "Donald Trump has rebuilt this country's strength," Karoline spat, her voice rising. "He has led with conviction while people like you sit in Hollywood mansions, sipping Chardonnay, and looking down on real Americans. Melania Trump is a pillar of dignity and grace. Unlike what you see in tabloids, the Trumps share a strong, private bond that the media will never understand because they are desperate to tear them down." The temperature in the studio dropped a full 10 degrees, but Meryl was relentless. She leaned in, voice softening but losing none of its venom. "Strong bond? You mean like the prenuptial agreement she renegotiated after the Stormy Daniels scandal? Or the Christmas recording where she mocked the decorations because, quote, who gives a fudge-a-ten about Christmas stuff and decorations, right?" said while pretending to be First Lady of America? Karoline's mouth opened, but no words came out fast enough. "You want America to buy the fairy tale, Karoline," Meryl said, slicing the moment with a look of deep pity. "But America is waking up." The host, sweating bullets now, attempted to break the tension with a commercial cue, but Karoline wasn't letting this go. "Shame on you," she barked, voice trembling but loud. "You sit there pretending you care about real women, but you only care about power. You weaponize gossip to tear down those who threaten your worldview. The tension grew to a crushing weight. Cameras zoomed in, catching every flared nostril, every furious twitch of an eyebrow. Even the control room fell into an uneasy silence, sensing something rare was unfolding. Meryl gave a theatrical little shrug, as if brushing dust off her shoulder. "You are defending a marriage that is rotting from the inside," she said. "And the rot starts at the head." The host tried again to steer them back, but the dam had broken. There was no containing what had been unleashed. Karoline leaned forward, nearly out of her chair, her voice cracking with the sheer force of her anger. "You can throw whatever dirt you want, but you will not erase the accomplishments of this administration," she roared. "And you will not use Melania as your pawn." Meryl's expression didn't change. If anything, she looked almost satisfied. Karoline's heart was hammering in her chest. She felt it vibrating through her ribs, the hot rage bubbling under her skin. She was not going to let some privileged actress waltz in and dismantle everything she had fought so hard to protect. But Meryl, calm as ever, delivered the final blow of the segment with clinical precision. "Defending the indefensible will eat." "You alive, Karoline?" she said, almost tenderly. "Ask Melania." Before Karoline could muster another retort, the studio lights dimmed slightly for a transition. The host, finally seizing the moment, hastily announced a commercial break. But there was no break. Meryl sat back smugly while Karoline seethed, her mind racing, calculating her next move. The battle was just getting started. Karoline's knuckles turned white against the polished desk, her breath shallow and fast. Across from her, Meryl reclined in her chair like she had already won, like she was the judge, and Karoline the guilty party awaiting sentencing. It was unbearable. Karoline was not here to play the villain in some Hollywood script. She was here to fight. The host, caught between two immovable forces, gave a weak, half-hearted smile to the cameras, pretending as if everything was fine. But everyone in that studio knew it was not. The second the red light blinked back on, Karoline struck. "You sit there and pretend to be a voice for women," Karoline said, her voice low but vibrating with anger. "But you have made a career out of standing on the backs of others, sneering at Americans who love their country, who believe in hard work over hollow virtue signaling." Meryl didn't flinch. She simply crossed one leg over the other. "Waiting," Karoline pressed harder. "You talk about Melania like you know her, like you've lived even one day of her life. Melania Trump is a woman who came from nothing, who worked, fought, and earned every single inch of her success. She wasn't handed a stage like you were. She wasn't handed awards and applause just for pretending to be someone else." The words came out sharper than Karoline even intended, slicing into the heavy air between them. Meryl tilted her head, studying Karoline the way a cat studies a bird before pouncing. "Worked?" Meryl said slowly, dragging out the word like it tasted bitter. "Are you referring to the modeling contracts that mysteriously disappeared, or the so-called architecture degree that never existed? The Trump narrative is built on as many lies as the man himself." The host shifted uncomfortably in his seat, visibly sweating now. Karoline shot forward, her hand slapping the desk for emphasis. "That's rich, coming from a woman who has spent decades pretending to be people." "She is not," Karoline snapped. "You think you're better than the rest of us because you can cry on command? Because you can fake heartbreak for a camera? That isn't bravery, Meryl. That's a performance." For the first time, a flicker of something, was it annoyance, crossed Meryl's face. It was gone almost as quickly as it appeared, but Karoline caught it. She had finally found a crack in the armor. "You want to talk about lies?" Karoline continued, her voice rising. "Then let's talk about the media lies that have painted President Trump as a monster for years, all while ignoring the corruption, the hypocrisy, the rot festering in the very industry you worship." The control room whispered urgently over headsets, the producers waving frantic signals, but neither woman so much as blinked. The confrontation had taken on a life of its own, and no one was going to stop it now. Meryl leaned forward, her voice dropping into a dangerous silky register. "You can shout all you want," she said. "It will not change the truth." The country watched Donald Trump parade Melania around like a trophy. They watched her swat his hand away at public events. They watched her plaster on a smile so frozen it could shatter. And now, you expect them to believe it was all love? Spare me. Karoline's chest rose and fell rapidly. She felt the fire boiling over, but she forced herself to keep her voice steady. To meet Meryl's attack not with shrieks, but with surgical precision. "You know what the real tragedy is, Meryl?" Karoline said, each word deliberate. "It's that you cannot imagine a world where loyalty, duty, and resilience matter more than public approval. Melania doesn't need to perform her love for cameras to prove her worth to anyone, least of all to self-righteous critics who hate her husband more than they care about facts." The silence that followed was thick and dangerous. For a moment, even Meryl seemed to hesitate, the weight of Karoline's words hanging heavy between them. But then, Meryl's smile returned, colder now, almost pitying. "You are too young to understand the damage you are defending," she said, her voice almost gentle, and somehow that made it worse. "I have lived through men like Donald Trump before. They leave wreckage, not legacies." Karoline opened her mouth to respond, but Meryl cut her off, her voice gaining strength. "And the worst part is, women like you, bright, ambitious women, you are the ones who get sacrificed first. When the lies collapse, when the empire crumbles, you will be nothing but a footnote. Just another true believer who was discarded the moment you outlived your usefulness." Karoline froze, her breath catching. Meryl saw it. She twisted the knife. "You think Melania is trapped?" "Maybe," Meryl said, her voice soft as a razor. "But she knows the game. She knows she was bought and sold long ago. You are still naive. Enough to believe you are playing it." The words landed like punches. The audience watching at home could feel it. The studio audience, the crew, the host. Everyone could feel the heat bleeding into the room, turning it into a powder keg. Karoline straightened her spine, forcing her voice back to steel. "I am nobody's pawn," she said, each syllable sharp, enough to draw blood. "And neither is Melania. She made her choices, just like I make mine. Not to please elites like you, but to fight for a country that still believes in truth, honor, and perseverance." The tension in the room was unbearable now, so thick you could almost see it hanging in the air. Meryl gave a slow, sarcastic clap, the sound echoing like gunshots against the studio walls. "Bravo," she said mockingly. "You almost sounded sincere." Karoline's vision blurred for a split second with rage. She had taken punches, she had countered, but Meryl's last blow had struck deeper than she wanted to admit. The host tried to jump in again, voice shrill. All right, let's pivot the conversation." But neither woman moved. Neither backed down. Meryl adjusted her chair, leaned in again, and this time her words were a quiet dagger. "If you tie your future to his, Karoline," she said, smiling, "without warmth, you will drown with him." Karoline stared back, every muscle in her body rigid, her heart pounding so loud she could hear it in her ears. She refused to look away. The studio lights burned hotter than ever. The cameras captured every twitch of her jaw, every flicker of emotion passing through her furious eyes. Karoline leaned forward, fists clenched against the desk, her voice dropping to a low, trembling growl. "I would rather drown standing for what I believe," she said, her voice shaking with rage, "than live in your false little kingdom of lies." For a moment the words just hung there, vibrating through the hot, suffocating air. And then Meryl slowly stood up. Without another word, without a glance at the stunned host or the cameras still rolling, she unhooked her mic, tossed it onto the desk with a casual flick of her wrist, and walked off the set, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Karoline stayed frozen in place, fists clenched, every nerve in her body still lit up like a live wire. The host turned to the cameras, swallowing hard, attempting to cobble together some coherent closing words. But the moment was beyond saving. The silence after Meryl's departure was almost unbearable, a heavy, raw void that seemed to swallow the entire set whole. Cameras stayed locked on Karoline, whose chest rose and fell sharply as she sat rigid in her chair, fists still planted against the desk like anchors. No one dared move. In the control room, producers barked at each other in hushed, frantic tones. The host, who had failed spectacularly to maintain control, stared into the camera, lips moving but no sound coming out for a moment as he struggled to remember his own name, let alone what he was supposed to say. Karoline finally shifted, the sound of her chair creaking loud in the dead space. She unclipped her microphone with a quick, jerky movement, setting it down carefully, almost ritualistically, on the desk in front of her. Every gesture was tight, precise, the body language of someone fighting not to lose control in front of a million watching eyes. Without a word, she stood up, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. She didn't storm off like Meryl. No, Karoline walked, chin high, spine straight, through the stunned cluster of crew members parting silently to let her pass. Inside her chest, her heart still pounded a brutal rhythm. The second she cleared the studio doors, the noise hit her like a crashing wave. Phones ringing, producers shouting orders, frantic voices demanding statements, reactions, damage control. A swarm of assistants clustered around her, all trying to talk at once, each voice more panicked than the last. Karoline, CNN already clipped the footage. MSNBC's calling it a total meltdown. Fox is pushing back, but it's getting ugly, Twitter's exploding. Streep's people are spinning it as a moment of truth. Karoline held up a hand, cutting them off without speaking. She needed air, space, time to think, but there was none. She pushed through the chaos, nearly barreling into an aide who was reading aloud trending hashtags in horror. Meryl McDrop. Karoline cracks. Melania hostage. It's everywhere. It's viral. Karoline didn't stop. She found an empty hallway, one blessed moment of silence, and pressed her back against the wall, sucking in a sharp breath. She squeezed her eyes shut. For a second she allowed herself to feel it. The humiliation, the anger, the sting of being caught off balance in front of millions. She had been ambushed, attacked, baited into losing her composure. And now the narrative was slipping out of her hands faster than she could grab it back. And worst of all, she knew Meryl had done it deliberately. She hadn't come to debate. She had come to destroy. And Karoline had walked right into the trap. Her phone buzzed violently in her jacket pocket. She pulled it out and winced. 100 missed calls. 200 texts. Her team, the White House, comms staff, even family members, all blowing up her phone in a frantic firestorm of panic and damage control. At the top of her screen, the trending topics loomed like a wall of knives. Meryl owns Fox. Karoline exposed. Melania speaks next. Karoline's stomach twisted. She knew how fast these things moved. In 1 hour, an empire could collapse if the right soundbite, the right image, went viral. And she had given them plenty to feast on. She scrolled through the news feeds, her throat tightening with every brutal headline. Meryl Streep eviscerates. Trump aide on live TV. Karoline Leavitt's on-air breakdown, a White House in crisis. Melania's marriage under new scrutiny after Streep bombshell footage of her slamming the desk. The wild fury in her eyes, the desperate edge to her voice. It was all being looped endlessly, analyzed frame by frame. Not as passion, not as conviction, as weakness. She gritted her teeth so hard it hurt. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Karoline squared her shoulders and turned back toward the chaos. If they wanted a war, she would give them one. When she re-entered the nerve center, the entire team swarmed her at once. their faces a mixture of terror and relief. "Karoline, we need a statement. Fox executives want you on Hannity tonight to control the narrative. The White House is asking if you can spin it as a feminist moment, you know, standing up to Hollywood elites." Karoline held up her hand again, but this time there was a new edge to her posture. "Get the comms team on a call," she said. "Now, we take control of this story. Meryl through mud. We show the country that we do not bend to bullies." Her staff nodded, scrambling to obey, but Karoline knew the real battle wasn't going to be fought in press releases or polite interviews. It was going to be fought in the trenches of public perception, brutal, bloody, and unforgiving. And right now, she was losing. Screens all around the newsroom flickered with split screens. Pundits already dissecting every glance, every word, every breath from the confrontation. A panel of smug-talking heads on MSNBC laughed openly as they replayed her outburst. "She completely unraveled," one of them said, smirking. "Streep didn't even have to break a sweat," another added. Karoline's fists clenched at her sides. She was not going to let them define her by one moment of anger. She grabbed a nearby staffer's laptop, pulling up a live feed of Twitter. And there, mixed in with the mockery and the memes, she saw something else. Support. It was scattered, buried beneath the noise, but it was there. People who were tired of being lectured by celebrities. People who saw her fury not as weakness, but as authenticity. "Good for Karoline," one post read. "Finally someone calling out Hollywood hypocrisy to their faces." "About time someone told Meryl Streep where to shove it," said another. The corner of Karoline's mouth tightened. She had lost the battle. But the war? The war was still wide open. Across the city, meanwhile, Meryl sat in a private room at her hotel, a glass of wine in one hand, her phone buzzing non-stop with congratulations from fellow actors, politicians, and activists. She smiled grimly at the flood of adoration. She had done what she came to do, torn a hole straight through the gleaming facade of the Trump mythos. Left the apprentice scrambling in the ashes, but even she knew this was not the end. Not yet. There would be blowback. There always was, and both women, fierce, stubborn, and unwilling to yield, were already preparing for the next collision. The world was watching, and neither side was backing down. The day after the broadcast, the world felt like it had tilted on its axis. Newsrooms were still foaming at the mouth, social media remained a battlefield, and Karoline Leavitt sat at the center of it all, the storm howling around her. She had barely slept, her mind gnawing endlessly on every jab, every word, every viral clip dissecting her reaction, her expressions, her supposed unraveling. She was not naive enough to believe it would just blow over. Not this time. Meryl had landed a brutal public blow, the kind designed to leave a mark. Karoline knew the damage wasn't just to her. It was to Trump, to Melania, to the entire machine she had sworn to defend. And yet, through the exhaustion, through the crackling fury that still buzzed under her skin, one thing burned brighter than anything else. She would not be humiliated into silence. She would not be another casualty Meryl Streep collected and moved past with a smug smile and another congratulatory text from her Hollywood friends. Karoline stared into the bathroom mirror of the studio's green room, tightening the pins holding her hair back. Her reflection looked back at her, pale but fierce, the corners of her mouth sharp with determination. She was scheduled to speak at a press conference within the hour, her first public appearance since the chaos had erupted. This was her shot. No scripts. No polished talking points handed down from the West Wing. This had to come from her. Raw, unfiltered, real. She stepped out into the hall, a small team trailing behind her, still arguing over last-minute strategy. But Karoline barely heard them. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as she approached the press room. She could already hear the low buzz of reporters waiting beyond the double doors, smell the caffeine and desperation hanging thick in the air. The doors opened. The room erupted in a cacophony of camera shutters and shouted questions. Karoline walked to the podium, placed her hands firmly on either side of it, and waited. Slowly, the noise died down. She looked out over the sea of expectant, hungry faces, the same ones who had already decided she had lost. Good. Let them underestimate her. When she spoke, her voice was steady, clear, and cut through the tension like a blade. Yesterday you saw a lot of headlines, she said. You saw viral clips. You saw a narrative built in real time by people who have hated Donald Trump, his family, and his supporters. Long before a single word was spoken on that stage, the room shifted uncomfortably. What you saw was not a woman breaking down, Karoline continued, locking eyes with the cameras. It was a woman refusing to let lies go unchallenged, refusing to let the elite, who have profited for decades off the backs of the people they mock, rewrite the truth while hiding behind a camera lens. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but she pressed on. I stood up because loyalty matters, integrity matters, commitment to something greater than your own celebrity matters. That is not something you can fake with applause or an award ceremony. The flashes from cameras lit up the room like lightning. Karoline felt the adrenaline surge through her veins, but she held her ground. And to those who mock the marriage of Donald and Melania Trump, she said, her voice cutting sharper now. To those who pretend to care about her while weaponizing her private life for political gain. Shame on you. You are not champions of women. You are opportunists dressed in righteousness. The weight of her words pulled the room tighter, breathless. Karoline leaned in slightly, voice dropping just enough to force the room to strain forward to catch every syllable. Melania Trump is not a hostage. She is not a victim. She is a woman who chose her path, who endures relentless scrutiny with dignity. And she does not owe you a smile, a tweet, or a performance to validate her existence. Some reporters lowered their cameras, realizing the gravity of what was unfolding. Karoline drew a slow, steady breath. I will never apologize, she said, her voice unwavering, for defending someone who refuses to be broken by the viciousness of a media class desperate to tear down what they cannot control. She straightened, planting both feet firmly behind. The podium. You want a villain? Karoline said, a slight cold smile curling her lips. Fine. I will be your villain. I will be the face you cannot ignore. I will be the voice you cannot silence. But I will not, ever, be ashamed. The silence was deafening. Not a camera clicked. Not a question rose. Karoline held the silence, like a weapon, forcing every single person in that room to sit with her words, to see her. Not as a breakdown, not as a viral moment, but as a woman who had survived the fire and come out sharper. And when she finally turned away from the podium and walked out, she did so slowly, deliberately, leaving the storm of flashing lights and shouted questions behind her like ashes in the wind. Meryl Streep watched the press conference from her hotel suite, the sound muted, the closed captioning crawling across the bottom of the screen. For the first time since her own dramatic exit, she felt something twist inside her. Not fear, not regret, but recognition. Karoline had taken the hit, and she had not crumbled. In the battle between them, there were no clear victors now. Only scars, and maybe, in a twisted way, a sliver of respect, grudging, bitter, but real. The country would move on. The news cycle would spin forward. But the confrontation would leave a mark, burned deep into the culture war they had both fought so ruthlessly. Meryl picked up her wine glass, swirling it thoughtfully. In the end, the battle had not destroyed Karoline Leavitt. It had forged her, and the world, whether it liked it or not, would have to face her again.